Whether you're a rider, groom, owner, or simply obsessed with all things equine, this podcast is for you. The curious, the dedicated, the horse geeks. Each episode brings you behind the scenes of equine veterinary medicine with expert voices from Netherlands, Pferdeklinik, and beyond. We dive deep into the science and practical know-how that help horses thrive. This is your trusted source of equine knowledge, straight from the people who live it every day. Learn more to care better. Welcome back, Derek. So we are going to take on the nimble topic of antibiotics today together. Antibiotic resistance in horses is an increasing concern, mirroring the trends that we've seen also in humans. So let's maybe start at the base. What is antibiotic resistance?
Antibiotic resistance is I suppose it's a life change for a bacterium, really. Antibiotics have been used for a long time as a means of controlling bacterial growth, and those occur in nature. They're everywhere. Antibiotics are part of nature, just like the bacteria are themselves. So this is part of a natural balance that's going on all the time. And of course, Andrew Fleming, who discovered penicillin and its consequences, recognized that firstly there were bacteria that didn't respond to that, and we know that that's going to be to penicillin. That was a different class of bacteria that would respond. But then he realized that there were some subclasses or some stages of development of these bacteria where an evolutionary change takes place, where they overcome the challenge of something that's killing them. And of course, it's just Darwinism, really, in a way, if you consider it like that, because these are circumstances where the survival of the fittest, in other words, those bacteria that don't respond to the antibiotic, they disappear. And those ones are the ones that are going to replicate and become more and more prevalent. So it's an evolution, I suppose, in the face of challenge. So, where you have polar bears that live in the ice and, gorillas that live in the jungle, this is all part of evolution, and the same applies to bacteria and to the antibiotics, which other organisms generally make. And these are often fungal organisms. The penicillin is a fungus. And quite a lot of the antibiotics that we use now come from funguses, because the funguses fought the bacteria and wanted to overcome the bacteria. And of course, nature has ordained a whole lot of strategies for individual circumstances to survive, because creatures, just like single-celled organisms, have to survive. And so gradually over the years, more and more resistance has developed, and antibiotic resistance imparts an ability of the bacterium that was sensitive to the antibiotic to survive in the face of it now. And that means that it's no good using that as a therapeutic measure. It's not going to be effective, and that's why gradually the bacteria survive, and the more antibiotics you throw at it, the more resistant strains there are within it. And of course there are mechanisms for this. This is genetic resistance, in other words. So these are mutational resistance things that happen, and these mutations result in a general inability of antibiotics to work both naturally and therapeutically. So even in nature, that would be the case. The bacteria would continue to develop, often to the detriment of the host. Whereas now, of course, the bacteria are developing in us to the detriment of us, but we have historically used an antibiotic which we can now not use, and so the bacteria become pathogenic again. And so the likelihood is that there would be a lot of deaths as a consequence. And that is exactly what is happening. It's exactly what's happening worldwide. And this is not only for animals, but it's for humans as well.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, historically, women in childbirth was a big issue. So puerperal septicemia was a very common thing for women giving birth. And they often died as a consequence of it. So there was a very high death rate until penicillin and all the antibiotics came along, and hygiene came along, and cleanliness came along, and now it was no longer a problem, and the death rate just plummeted. Really, really dropped away. Can you imagine if we took away all the antibiotics now? And suddenly these kind of things would start to rear their ugly head again in basic communities, in high civilized, inverted commas, civilized or developed countries. It probably won't happen quite so badly, but there will be, and there is a problem with antibiotic resistance in hospitals, and we have this in veterinary medicine as well. Mm-hmm. For sure we have it.
Yeah, but where does it come from, the antibiotic resistance?
It doesn't come from anywhere. It's just a genetic mutational change that takes place that means that the bug can survive in the face of the antibiotic, and it's a genetic mutation, and bacterial genetic mutations can be forced, and they happen rather more quickly than they happen for us, because a generation of a bacterium can be minutes sometimes, and so even within 24 hours mutations could easily have taken place that would have imparted the resistance to the antibiotic.
But is it an overuse of antibiotics that is causing it, or are there other causes for it?
I think it probably, overuse is one thing, but misuse is something quite different. And misuse is probably much more critical. Overuse, I suppose, is a form of misuse, and I think if you combine the two together, of course, you get all the reasons for it completely, where the wrong antibiotic is given in the wrong way, under the wrong circumstances, for no good reason, and where you say, this horse has a cough, I'll give it some antibiotic. Mm-hmm. You see, without finding out what the cough is. Over the years, I've seen lots of this kind of circumstance where it has developed time and time again in exactly the same way. And people have said, this horse needs antibiotic. And then you say, well, it hasn't responded to the antibiotic. But of course, that's not an antiviral drug, because, that it was a virus disease. And so actually, you might have made matters worse, not better, in some circumstances. Yeah. And furthermore, you're giving an opportunity for a whole range of bacteria to become resistant to that anyway. So ultimately, there's just no winning situation in this whatsoever. So misuse, I think, in the broadest sense, is probably the biggest danger of all. And of course, the veterinary profession has been blamed worldwide. Everybody knows that. If you listen to the press, as soon as they mention antibiotic resistance and the misuse of antibiotics, they talk about cattle, on growth promoting antibiotics, on vets dispensing antibiotics at all. And the truth of the matter is, I think it's much more complicated than that.
Yes.
There are some circumstances, I agree, where the veterinary profession has been responsible or has been irresponsible in doing it, and have been responsible, therefore, for development of significant resistance. But I think the medical profession has to take some blame for this as well. And I think for them to use the veterinary profession as a scapegoat,
it's an easy way out to blame someone else.
Someone else. And the veterinary profession is very soft.
Yes.
We don't argue.
No.
If they say we're doing it, then we say we will stop doing this. We will find a solution, because that's what we've done. And over the last 10 years, the amount of antibiotic use in the veterinary profession has plummeted, both in Europe and certainly in the United Kingdom. Not so much in America. It has dropped, but I think there are still circumstances where you can write a prescription for growth promoting antibiotics, and you can just write a prescription. Well, I'm not sure.
And they also use a lot of antibiotics in their feeding and all of these things as well.
Absolutely. They do a lot of that in chickens and pigs and cattle and so on and so forth. to control infections in otherwise unhygienic and bad conditions. And it's somehow not right.
No.
And I think we can look after our own houses. We can
Yes.
sort our own circumstance out, I think, probably by being careful about what we do and by being positive about the use of antibiotics, because actually they've saved countless lives.
Yes, it's not about demonizing it. It's
No.
just about using it in the right way.
Absolutely
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Absolutely right. And if we had lost the use of antibiotics in the veterinary profession, we would have a problem, and I think the world would have a problem.
Yes.
The world would have a problem, and there would be a lot of a disaster that came from that.
Yes.
And it would be, we would have deaths, unnecessary deaths.
From actually
And-
quite easy diseases.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And those infections would be more prevalent.
Yes.
And those infections might very well have a significant commercial kickback.
Yes.
And they may even have a health kickback for humans.
Yeah.
So I think it's a lot more complicated than is stated.
Yeah.
And I think somehow we need a gentle, rational, sensible approach to how we can control and limit the use of antibiotics to circumstances that genuinely need it.
Yes.
Genuinely need it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of misconceptions in the veterinary profession. For example, if a horse cuts itself, let's think of that, and the horse has got a cut on its shoulder or something like that from a piece of glass or tin or a bit of something or other. And we think, oh, well, we must give it some antibiotic. The question is, does it need antibiotic? And so if the answer is there a justified reason for the use of antibiotic here, either prophylactically or therapeutically? If you look at the wound and say, this is a very infected, pus-driven wound, does it need antibiotic? Would it help from that? Or are there other strategies that we can do that avoid the use of antibiotic? Because actually getting antibiotic to where you actually need it is extremely difficult.
Yeah, okay.
Because bacteria produce a little shield around them called a biofilm. And the biofilm protects the bacteria, and they sit there and they smile and they look and they say, oh, there, this is okay. And when the antibiotic's gone, out they pop again and away they go again.
Yeah.
So that was a complete waste of time.
Yeah.
So whenever we see that, it's not necessarily they're resistant to the antibiotic, it's just that the antibiotic hasn't been delivered
to
in
the right place,
concentration, to the right place, under the right mechanism.
Yeah.
And so getting antibiotics into wounds, very difficult
Yeah.
in significant quantity.
So actually giving antibiotics in a kind of preventative manner is a little bit like shooting in the dark.
Yeah, well, exactly
Yeah.
right, right. And I mean, historically, I was just as guilty as everybody. We all did it. We all did it. This horse has a very bad cut on its heel of its leg, and it's dirty wound, and I'll give it some antibiotic because I don't want it to develop a nasty infection in a place where it's critical. And
which basically comes from a good place, but it's just a matter of not having thought about it on a longer term.
Absolutely, in a prospective term.
Yeah.
You've got to look at what's going to happen over the future for weeks or months following this.
Yeah.
And actually, since I've stopped using antibiotics and started using other mechanisms to clean the wound, to get rid of the infection and to take the biofilms out and then to close the wound.
Yeah.
We have machines that do that, hydrosurgical debridement machines that are very easy to use. They clean the wound immaculately without putting knives and things on it, which hurt the horse. This doesn't do that. It takes everything off. It just sterilizes the area. And then you put some sutures in, and then you protect it with a nice dressing on the outside. And it heals.
Yeah.
Miraculous. It's a miracle.
Yeah.
It's a miracle. But then you think of horses with strangles, for example.
Yeah.
They're a very serious bacterial infection. that can kill.
Yeah.
It can kill if it gets septicemic, if it gets into the bloodstream, and furthermore, it can kill because it produces abscesses that stop breathing, that get into the lung and get into everywhere. They can be very dangerous. And then you say, well, is that a genuine circumstance where we can justify antibiotics? Of course we can. Imagine if they said we can't.
No, yeah.
Imagine.
Then that horse doesn't have a chance.
Absolutely. And but vets see, I mean, not by any means everybody. I agree.
No,
It's by no means everybody. But some people see, this is a very serious disease. It must need a very serious antibiotic. Instead of saying, this is a very serious disease, but we know that this very serious disease doesn't need a sophisticated antibiotic. Maybe it just responds to penicillin just the same as it always did.
Yeah.
See, so I'd only use penicillin.
No.
And sure enough, it gets better.
Yeah.
You see, so I think we are attracted or sucked into the vortex of antibiotic use where we're desperate to get this infection under control very quickly, and therefore we think that this involves the extreme antibiotic. Do you see?
To combat it with the strongest thing possible, where in fact, when you take a little bit more time to think about it, you can do something that is maybe more precise.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And furthermore, to improve the general health of the horse, because we have to remember that animals have been overcoming infection with their own immune system for billions of years, and we are all here because our immune system is fully functional.
Yeah.
You're sitting there in front of me, you're alive simply because your immune system has protected you since the moment, actually more or less since the moment of your conception. Your immune system has worked with your body and your mind and everything to keep you healthy.
Yeah, but cannot that as well be a cause? I think society in general today, we want everything to be fixed as soon as possible, as quickly as possible, that as soon as we have an infection or something, then it needs to be fixed and you have to go to the doctor to get it fixed instead of maybe just waiting it out. Okay, of course, if you have something severe, and in certain cases with horses, obviously, it's acute.
Yeah.
But sometimes also it takes just maybe a step back to think about what are we actually doing and what are the long-term consequences.
Yeah. And that brings it to the rational antibiotic use.
Yes.
This is the rational use of antibiotics, and it's something which we're trying hard within the veterinary profession to do. And as I said, it is extraordinary how much a reduction there is in the overall use of antibiotics and the overall variety of antibiotic use that is put into the veterinary profession. We've narrowed ourselves down to 2 or 3 basic antibiotics. We use an aminoglycoside, gentamicin. Sometimes amikacin in joints, where that has a little bit better general effect. And then we mostly use penicillin, and we mostly use trimethoprim sulfa. I don't like thinking of anything more severe than that. We don't like 3rd generation cephalosporins. We don't like, enrofloxacin and this kind of group of antibacterial stuff. They're there, but we have to be sure that we are using it in a rational way. So the concept of rational use has to be something that's very personal for vets. It's a very personal thing for them to decide how far they're going to carry this on. I mean, you can imagine that some vets don't use it at all.
Yeah.
and they just back off from it and don't bother. And some vets will say, these are available, I'm going to use them. And so neither is right, in my view, and there is a central or a middle point which biases you to keep in the grey area in the middle. the yellow area, the orange area. Don't look at the green end and don't look at the red end. Look at the orange end in the middle and stay within the light, the orange light. On a traffic light, stay within the orange light if you can. Sometimes biasing towards the heavier end, sometimes biasing toward the less. But being very sensible about how you give the antibiotic. Well, first of all, why?
Yeah.
Can you justify it either systemically, therapeutically, or prophylactically? Can you justify it?
Mm-hmm.
If yes, do I know what the bug is, or do I have a reasonable idea of what it might be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, is there any evidence?
Yeah, absolutely. And then knowing that, which is the best antibiotic for me to use,
mm-hmm.
And if you come down to one conclusion, then you say, right, now I know that antibiotic, and that antibiotic has to be given in this way or this way or this way. Mm-hmm. Gentamicin used to be the case. We used to give gentamicin twice a day. Now we only give it once a day because we know it's a concentration-dependent antibiotic. So you have to know whether an antibiotic needs to be there for all the time, or whether it can be there for a short time and have a bigger effect on the short time, so that the population of remaining bacteria start to think they're all right and they multiply like hell. And when they're multiplying like hell, they're more receptive to it, so you come along and kill them again.
Yeah.
Do you see? So these are the kind of things that have to be understood by the individual veterinarians. And my impression is that the teaching of this seems to be poor as a general rule. That we just, if you go to academic or undergraduate lectures, maybe I think we may be not tackling this hard enough. And saying there are other strategies that you can use. You can do it. I mean, my grandparents came to Switzerland in 1890 something, I think, to recuperate from TB. They got TB, but there was no antibiotics in those days.
No, then you were prescribed fresh air and
they
healthy
went
living.
off to Davos, and they came from two different parts of the world. And they met in Davos, and the rest is history. See, but they spent 4 years in Davos, recuperating at a sanatorium, and they. But they didn't have antibiotics, but they still recovered nonetheless. It just takes time, see, and that's the thing that people, as you said before, they get impatient,
they want a quick fix.
They want a quick fix, and they don't want any complications. They don't want to have to do anything either.
No.
So flushing the wound is not good enough.
No, exactly.
I don't want to flush the wound. I want you to give it some antibiotics and put some stitches in, and we don't have to bother with anything else. Do you see? But it's not. Life's not like that anymore. Anyway.
No, I don't think it's ever been. But
no, exactly right. Exactly right. But I have hope. I have hope. There are alternative things that are coming on the line. I see there's a new antibiotic just come out, but we are. That's out of the question for humans. It costs thousands. For even one dose at the moment, and it's never. I don't think it'll ever catch on, but big hospitals may sometimes need to do it in order to save somebody's life. And the life of anybody is precious. They're precious. We all want to live as long as possible, as well as possible.
Yes, of course.
And so if antibiotics have to be given and has to be taken, well, then antibiotics have to be given and we have to take them. So that's the long and the short of it. But they have to be rational. And that means veterinary practice is not really very tolerant of that investigatory process, I think, where we need to know what bug it is that we've got. So we haven't got that tied down well enough, I think. We're not doing enough. And I think we could do better. We could do a lot better.
So there are no protocols on how to actually use the antibiotics, or?
I'm sure there are, but I don't know of them. I mean, I've made up an algorithm. Which just says, can you justify it? If yes, fine. If no, you're not going to do it. Okay, so you have to answer that basic question first, and then if you say yes, then you can say, are you justifying this prophylactically or therapeutically, you see? And if it's prophylactically, the next question is, what is the likely organism involved? And then do you know the likely organism? Yes, it's likely to be that kind of organism, whether it's gram-negative or gram-positive, and then broadly. And then after the likely organism, you say, from my pharmacological training and my knowledge and my reading every day that I do every day without fail, ho ho ho.
Yeah.
Okay. Then this is the antibiotic that gives it the best chance. And then you have to say, right, I'm going to give that antibiotic because I know how I have to give it. Can it go by mouth? Has it got to go by injection? Can it go intravenously? Can it do this and that and this and that? And then, yes, that's the route at which it has to be given, the dose it has to be given, and the duration of the course that should be given. Not necessarily has to be, but should be given. And if you've got those three, and you've tied all that in, that is called rational antibiotic use.
Yeah.
If it's now prophylactically, beg your pardon, if it's therapeutically, you now just cut out one of those equations, that one only, and that says, this is an infected wound. Do I know what the species is? If not, I have to find out. So I have to take swabs and I have to look for what this bug is, and then I have to select from that an antibiotic, and that's why you have the sensitivity. Now, that used to take time, used to take a lot of time, but there are ways in which it is done more or less instantly. Yeah. There are mechanisms for genetic investigation of bugs. So you take the swab, you pull it through the thing, and you wait for a little while, and it says, oh, that's a streptococcus, and furthermore, it's resistant to this and that and this and that. Penicillin, drug of choice. Yeah. Click. That's perfect. It. I'll reach for the penicillin. And then we join the same thing. Yes. We join the same thing, and we say, now, do I know what the root?
Yeah, but basically you've taken the time to think about it and not just giving it without thought.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's a critical issue. We have to do better than this. We just simply.
But do you think there is a little bit of an issue? I think not only in the veterinary profession, but in general, that we have a tendency not to ask the question why enough. That sometimes we just.
Yeah. Rudyard Kipling, I don't know if you know Rudyard Kipling, he was a British author who wrote The Jungle Book.
Oh, yes.
Which no doubt you remember. Yes. That's Baloo the bear and Kaa the snake and Mowgli and stuff. He wrote those books. And he wrote, you should read them actually. I think everybody should read the Just So stories. Yes. How the elephant got his trunk and so on and so forth. And in the front of that book, he answered, he said he wrote this book for children, in answer to his children and his grandchildren, where he said, I have 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what and why and when and how and where and who. Do you see? Now, if you go through that, what, infection, why it's there, when it developed, because that's chronic and acute infection, what and why and when, how did it become infected, where and who. Okay, who does it affect and what is the consequence, you see? And maybe we should just interpret that and put, instead of the what, we can put what antibiotic. Yes. What about that? Yeah. That would be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And you could include the Jungle Book in the veterinary studies.
Absolutely. The Jungle Book is an amazing story, and all his stories they've all got a moral in them some way. You know? There's a story in the Just So stories, which is how the butterfly that's stamped, how a little butterfly had a capability of stamping his foot and getting a big ghost would come out and do whatever his bidding was. And you should read it. You will laugh.
I will.
You will laugh. You will cry. You will read it to everybody that you know. And so that's called the Just So stories.
Okay, I will definitely
and
read that.
And you go and get it. There'll be a well, you'll read the. You speak beautiful English. There's an English version, but it's available in every language in the world. Chinese, I've seen it in Chinese. I've seen it in Japan.
Well, it's
I've
a
seen
classic.
it in South America. It's a classic.
Yeah.
And I think it just illustrates, that if you have an inquiring mind, and then have the patience to answer the inquiring mind, it's no good going home and thinking, I wonder what that was, I wonder what I should do about it. You shouldn't only do that.
No, you
should then say, right, I'm going to find out.
Yeah.
I'm going to find out, and I'm going to do the right thing. Yeah. And that's more applicable now to antibiotic. Actually, all drug use, because it doesn't only antibiotics, it's antibiotics as well, worming treatments and stuff. I know Switzerland doesn't have very much by way of redworm infestation, so you don't have a real problem with anthelmintic resistance. So we've got fenbendazole resistance. We've got even now ivermectin resistance.
Oh,
and that's disaster.
Yeah,
that is a real disaster.
Yeah.
But but the same thing applies. And I mean, I work a lot with cancer, as you know, and I do a lot of cancer treatment and a lot of chemotherapy of varying descriptions. And of course, cancer cells have the same ability to produce resistance to the chemotherapeutic as bacteria do. Yeah. It's just that the cancer cells replicate a little bit slower, and they have an unstable genome, so they are more difficult to manage in that respect. So it's less likely to develop in cancer cell, but it does. Yeah. Unfortunately, I know it does. I've had it happen. Yeah. I've had it happen.
So to wrap this episode up, if we're talking directly to the horse owners, what would be your take-home message for them in terms of antibiotics?
Leave the decision for antibiotic to the veterinarian. Do not ask for antibiotics. In fact, you might just say, when the vet reaches for the antibiotic and the vet says, I'm going to give it an antibiotic, you might want to say why and ask the vet to justify its use. Because that way you'll be contributing towards the general benefit and the rational antibiotic use.
So with those very actionable words, we're going to finish off this episode. Thank you so much, Derek.
That's a pleasure.
If you would like to support the charity or find out more about Vets with Horsepower, you can head to their website at vetswithhorsepower.com. You will also find the links in the description of this episode. Thank you for tuning in this week. We hope to see you soon. Learn more to care better.